Good evening, all.
Hello.
Folks joining in here. How was everybody's first week back? A little stressful? Trust me, I feel your pain, especially when it comes to McGraw-Hill Connect. As good as that thing is, it's being a real pickle this semester. All right, 6:30. Let's go ahead and get started. So thanks for joining tonight. I appreciate it. I know, again, 6:30 after the start to a crazy semester is certainly not ideal, but I appreciate everybody being on tonight. Last week we had an opportunity to kind of talk a little bit about how our emotions factor into our decision-making process. And somehow I have a feeling that maybe some of those lessons we're applying to our own personal lives right now, just kind of dealing with everything that's going on and trying to manage as best we can throughout this situation. So tonight we're going to start getting into financial planning and kind of the meat of what this course is all about. So we'll spend the first half of the lecture tonight talking about, what a financial plan looks like. Okay, the various steps that are involved with completing a financial plan to make it effective, to make it a plan that can be monitored, to make it a plan that has a good chance of actually being successful. Okay, we're going to get into things like SMART goals. What is a SMART goal? And I don't mean like what's an intelligent goal. I mean SMART. It's an acronym that we'll talk about. Okay. And then we'll wrap up the lecture this evening getting into kind of the time value of money and making that applicable to your own lives. How much money can you afford for a car payment? You want to save money for retirement. You're putting away a certain amount. How much is that going to grow to? You want to take an awesome trip, after graduation. How much does it cost? And then how much do you have to save every month to get to that point? So the second half of the class is really going to be fairly valuable for you as you move forward with your time in Loyola and beyond. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to go ahead and start here. Okay, so tonight we're going to get into chapter 1, which is the personal finance basics. Okay, just high-level introduction to the planning process that you can use as an individual. And quite frankly, this is the exact same process that I go through with all of my clients. Okay, when I first sit down with them, we start talking about what are they trying to accomplish? Why are they even sitting with me to begin with? And then when the process around developing a plan. A lot of folks that I meet for the first time feel that, well, we'll be done with the plan, after a couple of meetings. And that's not really the case. The financial plan is designed to be something that doesn't just collect dust. It's designed to achieve very specific goals that you have. And once those goals are achieved, those goals get replaced by other goals that might require taking a little different level of risk than you were willing to take when you set up your first initial set of goals. So it's a process that is designed to be implemented, revisited, reviewed, okay, and then re-implemented as your goals change. So there's really 5 learning objectives that we're going to try to get through tonight, okay? We're going to go through how we go about analyzing the process for making the decisions that we make. A lot of financial advisors out there will simply ask you the question, well, how much money do you want to have? Well, that's a dumb question because we all would like to have more money than what we have today. And that's a good goal. We obviously want to build wealth like we talked about last week. But more importantly, the process around the planning revolves more around what your goals are. What are you trying to accomplish? If you're going to put your money into the stock market, which has the possibility of going up, the probability of going down, you want to make sure that your goals are aligned with how you're investing. We're going to take a look at how we go about assessing what our personal and economic factors are that influence the planning process. Okay, so first of all, how much risk are you willing to take? Maybe you are a risk taker. Maybe you're not a risk taker. What happens if interest rates go up? What does that do to your investments? Okay, what if, there's a change in the White House in November and different monetary policy gets put in place that impacts things like inflation or the money supply in the markets. Okay, all of those things factor into how we go about selecting the appropriate investments to support the goals that we have. The third objective is how we go about actually developing our goals. And quite frankly, this is a fun one. This is where you just get to sit down with a blank white piece of paper and write down any goals that you might have. And then you go through the prioritization process. And then the fourth objective that we're going to talk about tonight is once we've got those goals in place, okay, or we've thought about those goals, how does the time value of money impact our ability to achieve those goals? Okay, what's the present value today of that $5,000 trip you might want to take after graduation? Okay, if you want to pay off your car loan in 6 years, how much additional money do you have to put down every month in order to do that? All right, so we're going to use Excel extensively for the fourth learning objective here. And then finally, we'll round out the night talking about how we go about identifying, strategies for achieving the goals that we've set out to achieve based upon where we are in the different life cycles that we have. Because, how you go about planning your goals right now as a single college student is very different than how you go about planning your goals if you get married in the future and then maybe decide to have kids. And even that's even different from when you think about the possibility of how those goals might look when you're contemplating retirement in 40 years. So when we talk about that first learning objective, about analyzing the process for making personal financial decisions, the first thing we have to talk about is what, as my son would say, what even is personal financial planning? Okay, and it's pretty simple, all right? It's really basic. It's nothing more than the process that we go through for managing our money to achieve some personal economic satisfaction. And like we talked about in our first lesson, what your personal economic satisfaction is going to be different than every other person on this call. It can be different than your future spouse or your future partner, okay? It is about how we go about managing our money to achieve what we're trying to accomplish. Okay, so what are some of the advantages of financial planning? Okay, well, guess what? People who have a financial plan are more effective in achieving their goals. They're holding themselves more accountable. Okay, so there's an increased effectiveness, okay, in how we go about obtaining wealth, using wealth, and then protecting the wealth that we've worked really hard to create. Okay, if we have a plan, we are in control of our financial affairs. It helps us avoid getting into debt. It helps us avoid bankruptcy. It helps us avoid being dependent upon others for our financial security, right? And quite frankly, the third bullet is really important. If you go do the research, the vast majority of relationships that fall apart, either just breaking up or through divorce, tend to stem from some sort of financial insecurity within the relationship. So being able to communicate with your partner or your spouse around your finances, around a jointly designed financial plan is extremely important to the health of your personal relationships. Okay? And then the last bullet, it gives us freedom. Okay, we can take the vacations that we want to take, and without worrying that we're not going to have money to pay our bills next month. Okay, it helps us achieve that personal economic satisfaction that we're all looking to achieve. So there's really 6 steps to the financial planning process, all right? And no matter what person you talk to or what fancy, financial planning process they have, it all kind of comes down to these 6 steps. The first step is we got to take stock of where we are right now, okay? We all want more. There's no doubt about it. No one on this call could tell me that where you are right now is where you want to be for the remainder of your life. Okay, so we first have to determine where we are right now. What is our current financial situation? Okay, the second step of the process is figuring out what goals we've got. Okay, I want to pay off my student loan debt. I want to buy a new car. I'd like to save money for a new house. I'm getting married in 2 years. I need to save money for the wedding. Designing your goals. And it's a brainstorming exercise. It's one of those exercises where no one gets to tell you that you're wrong. No one gets to tell you that what you're trying to achieve is unattainable. It's a blank slate. It's a whiteboard with a dry erase marker where you get to lay out all the goals that you've got and the timeline in which you'd like to achieve them. Okay. 3, identifying what we call alternative courses of action. Okay. Buying a house in the next 3 years might be a goal, all right, but that may not be attainable. So we have to reprioritize those goals to accomplish the most attainable goals while also providing ourselves with a high probability of success for those other goals that we're also trying to accomplish. Once we've done that, we move into step 4, where we're evaluating alternatives. Okay, so maybe buying a house in 3 years is not attainable, okay? But renting a nice home in 3 years is attainable. So getting out of the 1-bedroom apartment that you might be in and renting a home for a couple of years might be attainable. So you get kind of the lifestyle benefits of being in a home, okay? But you're not quite yet there to purchase the home. So considering some alternatives, where you are in your current life situation, what your personal values are. And this is a big one. I have lots of clients when I work on, building their and designing their investment portfolios. Some of my clients have pretty outspoken, opinions about what companies they want to invest in versus others. I have some that absolutely effing hate Walmart. They believe that Walmart is a scourge on society, right? That it puts small businesses out of business. And in many ways, I can't disagree with them, all right? But it also provides goods and services to a large group of the population at some of the lowest possible prices that you can find, okay? So your personal values also kind of factor into the decision-making process. Economic factors, socio-political things that are going on, regulatory environments, monetary policy from the Federal Reserve, changes in interest rates. Those kinds of things can definitely impact our ability to achieve our goals over the long term. And then we have to assess those alternatives. We have to use the tools that I'm going to teach you tonight to really see if these goals are truly attainable. Next week we have a special guest joining us on the call, Lisa Fairchild. I'm being observed next week, so everybody be nice. No bad comments in the chat room, okay? But one of the things we're going to talk about next week is budgeting and the personal financial statements that you should be thinking about, the income statement. So if you're a finance person, you're reading the text for next week and you're going to go, what the hell is cash flow statement? That's not a cash flow statement, that's an income statement. So the text calls it a cash flow statement. I'm a finance guy. To me, that's an income statement, but it's a summary of all of your operations. How much money did you make working? How much money went out the door to your retirement plan, to Uncle Sam, to rent, to utilities, to your cell phone payment. So we'll talk about that next week. So how we assess those things is really important. And then once we've done steps 1 through 4, and we've nailed down, we've prioritized the goals, and we've developed a bit of a plan as to how we're going to accomplish those, then we create and implement the plan, okay? We put the plan into action, right? And then we let it do what it's going to do, right? We're going to revisit it, but we're not revisiting it every day. We got to let our plan take hold and do its work. And then the final step of the process, all right, is to review, monitor, and revise the plan over time. That's a crucial step. And this process is circular, all right? It's not linear. It's not you start at step 1 and you end with step 5. Step 6 is like your feedback loop, okay? You have to continually, maybe once every 6 months, maybe once a year, go back to your plan, write down, see which goals that you've actually accomplished, strike those off, what goals are next in line, what new goals have come in, and the process starts over again, okay? So it's a 6-step process, and it's ongoing, right? So step 1, determining your current financial situation. Next week, we're going to get into that. How much money do you have in checking? How much money do you have in savings? All right. How much money is coming in the door? How much money is going out the door? And what's left in the middle, the difference between the two is the money that you've accumulated or saved, okay, to do whatever you're going to do. It's called disposable income. Okay. How much debt do you have? So it's really writing down your current situation. All right. And at the end of the chapter, or at the end of the text, all right, there's some really good, step-by-step guides as to how to go about building your own personal financial plan. So we've got the income statement, all right, or a cash flow statement as the text calls it. A snapshot of everything that's your operating activity for your life, revenues minus expenses. And then we have a list of all the things that we own and all the things that we owe. And that's called a balance sheet, okay? And when we take all the things that we own and we subtract out all the things that we owe, we call that net worth, all right? If you're a finance person, all right, you'll recognize what net worth looks like from the balance sheet financial statement of a corporation, because it's assets equals liabilities plus equity. So your assets are what you own, okay? Your clothes, your televisions, your cars, okay? Your house, your boat, your jet ski, your jewelry, okay? Whatever you own is an asset. Then whatever you owe sits as a liability. So maybe you've got a mortgage on your house. Maybe you've got a principal that you still have remaining on your car loan. All right, that's a liability. And once we take the assets minus all those liabilities, what we've got left is our own equity. Okay, it's the wealth that we've accumulated, the wealth that we've built from doing what we've been doing. Okay, and then finally, it's our goal to match the goals, okay, match those financial goals to where we are from an income standpoint and where we think we might be from a potential earning power standpoint. Sometimes it's okay to take on debt now, like owning a home, okay, and maybe stretching yourself a little thin on your budget, because your future earning power is going to add to your revenue, which will eventually flow through the bottom line and increase your disposable income. Okay, so you may be in a tight spot for a little period of time, but as your life cycle changes, your future earning potential goes up. Okay, and we'll talk more about that when we get into chapter 3. Okay. The second step in the financial planning process is we got to develop our goals, all right? And just like we talked about in the first lecture, we've got to understand how we feel about money, okay? Do we just burn money? Do we just burn cash? We're spenders all the time, or are we savers? How much risk are we willing to put on the table for a certain level of commensurate reward? Okay, so how we feel about money can kind of dictate what our investment strategy is going to look like. Okay, do we feel this way about money because our parents told us that we had to do things a certain way? Or do we feel a certain way about money because that's how we feel as individuals? okay? You guys are at a time in your life where most of you right now might be at home, okay, with your parents, right? And you're kind of now, quote, maybe living under their rules a little bit more than what you've been used to, okay? And so where that source of those feelings come from is very important, okay? Finding somebody that you trust to talk about money is really, really important, okay? How we go about determining the basis for our financial priorities, okay? The Joneses next door just put in a brand new kitchen. Are you the kind of person that says, I now need to go out and put in a new kitchen in my house? Or are you the kind of person that says, hey, good for them. My kitchen's, it works just fine, you know? So how you go about what the basis for your priorities are. So social pressures, household needs, or personal desires comes into play. And then finally, you have to decide on your specific financial goals that you're going to pursue for your personal situation. That's why this class is called Personal Financial Management. It's not called, Loyola Undergraduate Student Financial Management. It's called Personal Financial Management because each one of you is different. And each one of you are going to have different goals with a different feeling about money. And you know what? That's the way it should be. If we all had the same feelings about money, all right, the markets wouldn't even exist because no one would be buying and nobody would be selling because everybody felt the same way. Okay, so we need to have our own personal opinions about money because that's how the markets are supposed to work. Step 3, identifying those alternative courses of action that we talked about. Do we keep going down the same path that we're on, right? Could be the right choice. All right, everything's running, the engine's running smoothly, the plan is in place, no problems. All right, so you just keep going down the same path. Has your purchasing power increased because you got a raise at work, or you got a nice bonus because you did an awesome job over the last year? Okay, maybe you can expand your current situation with that additional wealth that you've created, right? Or maybe the path that you're on, you simply say, you know what, this isn't working and I got to change course. Whatever it is, identifying those alternative courses is really important. Okay, so how we go about achieving those goals, sometimes we have to get a little bit creative in the way that we think about money. Okay, um, I personally love arbitrage. I enjoy going out and finding irrational differences in the financial markets. Sectors, industries where emotions have kind of taken hold and it's created a disconnect from what the efficient market looks like. Last week we talked a little bit about, Norwegian cruise lines. I think Liam may have brought that up last week, okay, as it related to the whole COVID situation. And we looked at Norwegian cruise lines. That is how I run my business. That is the value that I deliver to my clients. Changing the current situation kind of based upon those arbitrage type opportunities. So being creative is important as well, right? So the last bullet here, choosing to do nothing, all right, could be the right choice. All right, indecision is also a choice. All right, but if you remember from last week, that also could lead to that bias of regret avoidance. We don't make a decision because we don't want to be wrong. Okay, we're afraid of being wrong, so we avoid making a choice. We don't want to regret the choice that we made. Okay, so there are definitely times where not making a decision can be a dangerous alternative to taking that little bit of risk. Okay, not all the time, because there are definitely times when not taking a decision is the right decision to make. Give yourself more time to think about it, or give the market time to settle down. Not making a decision can sometimes be the right decision, but just be careful that sometimes a do nothing approach can have disastrous consequences. Step 4, right? How we go about evaluating the alternatives. Opportunity cost. Every choice, every decision that you make in your life comes with a price, comes with something that you're giving up, okay? We can't do everything. Therefore, whether we recognize it or not, when we're making that decision, Every choice that we make has a cost associated with it. Okay. You want to go out and buy, a $65,000 BMW M3, one of my most favorite cars on the planet. All right. And I had one for quite a while. But you know what? At that level of cost, I was giving up a lot of other things on the other side. The extra money that I was paying for the car and $400 when I needed to get a tire changed, right? It was a cost, but there was the other side of that equation, things that I was giving up, willingly giving up because I made the choice to get it. But nonetheless, every choice that you make has a cost associated with it, the trade-off, okay? So make no mistake about it. As you already know, you've probably made literally, I don't know, 200 to 300 decisions today alone, okay, without even recognizing that you did it, okay? The big decisions need to have careful thought put to them. And the other side of what that decision looks like. What are you giving up in order to do this, right? You chose to go to Loyola and spend $65,000 a year to go to Loyola when you could have gone to a different university at a much lower cost, right? But you chose to go to Loyola because it has an exceptional reputation in the industry. The opportunities for you after graduation are going to be more than what they otherwise would have been possibly at another institution, okay? So the $65,000 a year that you're spending is worth it for the opportunities that you're going to be afforded in the future, okay? And when we think about making those choices, we have to evaluate the risk. We don't have any idea what the outcome of a decision of ours is going to be, no matter how small the decision, right? There's always uncertainty. Okay, so we have to consider the risk associated with the decisions that we're going to make. And is there a way that we can protect against that risk? All right, in the finance world, we call that hedging. Can you hedge the risk? Can you hedge all the risk? Can you hedge a portion of the risk? Can you hedge none of the risk? Okay. And when we get to kind of the insurance portion of this semester, we're going to talk about what risk is and how we can go about transferring risk or avoiding risk in our lives. Okay. Financial planning resources. All right. This is important. There's so many things out there that are going to try to steer you one way or the other. So just like we talked about last week, do your research. Don't believe just the first thing that you're told. Ask your parents what they do. Ask your parents if they have a financial plan. Have they followed it? When was the last time they looked at it? You know, are they on track? Should they maybe readjust some of the things that they've got within their plan? You know, a lot of your parents probably do have a financial plan, but you know what? A lot of your parents probably have it collecting dust somewhere. No offense to them, but it's just the truth. Life happens, we forget about it, it collects dust, and before we know it, we've forgotten that we even have one, and then we've lost track of our goals. So what are the different types of risk that might exist out there? Well, inflation risk, all right? If you've taken an economics class, and I've asked this question kind of a lot, pretty much every semester, about whether or not you guys have taken an economics class. And I've learned that Loyola doesn't require all majors to take an economics class, all right? The finance folks have to take an econ class, but not all majors have to take one, which I think is kind of silly. Everyone needs to understand it because it impacts everything that you do. So inflation, if you don't know already, it's the general increase in the cost of goods and services over a period of time, okay? So the price of, you know, a dozen eggs 10 years ago is not the same price as a dozen eggs today, okay? And a lot of that, some of that has to do with just inflationary effects within the economy. Interest rate risk, monetary risk, how the Fed, the Federal Reserve, we'll just call it the Fed, how the Fed changes its monetary policy to influence interest rates in the economy. You know, right now, we're basically at 0% interest rates from a bank lending standpoint. I just refinanced my house. I went from a 30-year mortgage at 3.8%. I refinanced to a 15-year mortgage at 2.45%, just because the interest rates in the economy have come down so much. And doing that, all right, and I did it in Excel, and you can do it too, put literally $70,000 in my pocket, like that, because of the avoidance of interest, period, plain and simple. And that's just over the next 9 years, because within the next 9 years, we might be looking to sell this home and move somewhere else. So that's just within the next 9 years that it puts 70 grand into my pocket. So interest rates are a huge factor in your ability to achieve your financial goals. Income risk. This is a big one, okay? If you get injured on the job, right, do you have a backup plan, right? If you're married and your wife doesn't work and she's taking care of the kids, or conversely, like I chose to do, where I was staying home with the kids, raising the kids, if something were to happen to the income earner for the house, what things do you have in place to hedge against the risk of loss of income? Personal risk, okay? This is a big one, right? Health risks. Maybe your health changes 5-10 years down the road, right? Safety risks, right? The additional costs that come from those personal situations that might arise in your life. And then finally, liquidity risk. And this is a big one, we're going to talk more about this next week. Have you paid yourself first? If there's one thing that I want you to learn in this semester, okay, it's pay yourself first, okay? We have to pay Uncle Sam, that's fine, all right? But pay yourself first. Put money into savings, okay? Don't give your money to a credit card company. Pay yourself first. Liquidity. Give yourself a cushion for if something were to happen, all right? Like that nail in your $400 M3 tire, okay? If something were to happen unexpectedly, do you have enough liquidity, cash on hand, or assets that are easily converted to cash, okay? And when we get into the conversation around budgeting, we're going to talk about how much money should you have in that emergency fund for liquidity purposes, okay? And it's hard to build it up, but that's why you're supposed to have a plan, so you can remain disciplined about building that emergency fund, which should be 30% of your monthly income, or 3 months worth of expenses. Let's put it that way. It's a better way of looking at it. 30% of your income is really what should be listed in terms of like your rent or your mortgage payment. Okay, so your emergency fund should be large enough to cover 3 months of all of your living expenses. And when we go through an actual budget next week, you're going to see how much that actually translates to. Okay, so it's going to require some discipline. The fifth step is, once we've done all the other planning, we've assessed everything, we've finalized our goals, now it's time to put that plan into action, right? Whether it's something as simple as, not going to Starbucks every day, but going every other day so that you have more disposable income, or whether it's putting aside an extra $100 a month for your paycheck to save up for that vacation, or whether it's starting a Roth IRA right now, all right, which is a tax-free investment vehicle. It grows tax-free. You won't pay any tax when the money comes out, when you retire, okay? So how much does a $100 a month investment in a Roth IRA at a conservative rate of return, how much will that grow to in 40 years? You'll learn how to do that tonight, okay? And then in order to effectively implement your plan, you might need some assistance. Early on, pretty much you can do all this stuff yourself, all right? You can put money into your savings account. You can open up a higher interest savings account at, say, a Barclays or a Citi, all right, where you're not seeing it every day, so you're not tempted to spend. But you may need help from other people, like myself as a financial advisor, or from your parents to get guidance, okay? So don't think that you're kind of in this alone. If you feel like you've hit a roadblock, there's lots of people out there that are willing to help you. And then finally, which I feel might be one of the most important steps in the financial planning process, is you don't just set it and forget it, okay? You're keeping track of your goals. Which ones have which ones have you accomplished? Which ones are next on the list, okay? And how are you going to implement and change your plan to accomplish those goals next? So a complete review of your plan doesn't have to happen every day. It shouldn't happen every day. If you're constantly changing course, then you never get anywhere. Implement your plan, let it do its job, and then review it, on a regular, every 6 months, every 12 months kind of basis. Okay. If the markets really start to go in the toilet, if something really nasty happens in November, as a result of the election, you always have the opportunity to review it under those kinds of conditions. Okay. So pay attention to what's happening in the economy. Pay attention to what's happening in your personal life. Okay. Because you might need to readjust your plan, on a moment's notice. Okay. And by making the review process a regular part of your annual existence, right? It allows us to become better decision makers. Okay. It forces us to keep up with what's going on. It forces us to pay attention to what's happening in the economy globally and domestically. Okay. And making those little adjustments from time to time gives us a higher probability of success for achieving our goals. Okay. So the second part, the second learning objective for tonight is we need to assess our personal and economic factors that have influence over our planning process. Okay. And the first one is just simply, where are we in our life? You right now, right, young adults, you don't necessarily have the same level of responsibilities that you're going to have in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Okay, so assessing where you are in your current life, the adult life cycle, is extremely important. All right, do you want to buy a bigger house? Are you looking to get married? Are you looking to have kids? Right. One of the things we're going to look at tonight is, if you do decide to have kids in the future and you raise them to be greyhounds and they want to go to Loyola, how much is it going to cost for a year of tuition 20 years down the road? Okay, we'll calculate that tonight. Okay, what are your values? Our personal values have a tremendous influence on whether we spend or save. Okay, remember, there's only 3 things we can do with our money: spend it, save it, or share it with other people. So maybe you've got some philanthropic desires. Okay, and part of your budget is you'd like to give to charity, and that's a priority for you. Okay, so that's a goal, and that's a great goal to have. Okay, but just remember, pay yourself first. Okay. So when we think about how do we go, where does all this money go? Okay. How does money transact within the system? Right. We're talking about the financial system. Okay. We are users. Okay. We're on the right-hand side. Right. We are borrowers and spenders of money. Okay. As individuals, businesses are borrowers and spenders of money. Governments borrow and spend money, and other foreign countries borrow and spend money. Okay. And when we borrow money, we owe interest on the money that we borrow, and maybe we get money in the future for dividends, or maybe we have to pay dividends to the people that gave us money. Okay. So money's coming in and out. We are users of money. We have these people in the middle that are the kind of the brokers of the money, the brokers between the providers of the cash and the users of the cash. Okay, and those are those financial intermediaries that you're already familiar with: the banks, lending institutions, okay, insurance companies, investment companies. The financial markets are a broker. They bring together buyers and sellers. Okay, and then you've got the providers of the cash, which can also be individuals, private equity, venture capital. Okay, governments are providers of money, right? Foreign entities, right? So you kind of have this intertwined system of how money moves between providers and users across those intermediaries, or brokers, as we call them. So again, if you've had an economics class, awesome. If you haven't, I strongly suggest you take it as an elective. Okay, it's a really important class that you should take in order to understand how economies function. okay? And the basics of economics is simply the study of how wealth is created, distributed, and destroyed, right? The forces of supply and demand on how prices get set. You'll see me do this sometimes, all right? Those are supply and demand curves. The higher the demand for a product, the higher the price. The less demand, generally speaking, the lower the price. Okay? So the Federal Reserve creates the monetary policy to either inject money into the economy to kickstart it, okay? Or they can sell bonds into the market to take money off the table to slow the economy down. So how the Fed deals with the money supply, how much money is actually out there to be transacted upon via these intermediaries, okay, can dictate the interest rates within the market. So the Fed has tremendous power over monetary policy within the United States. Okay? Things happen around the world, right? You know, the very thought that the United States or Saudi Arabia might have been getting into a war with Iran as a result of the Iranian warships attacking oil tankers in the Strait in the Middle East, that had an enormous impact on oil prices around the world. Okay, so the global economy has tremendous influence on our ability to achieve our goals when we have our money invested, which we should, in order to achieve a rate of return that is commensurate with the level of risk that we're willing to take. Okay, US companies fight for foreign companies in terms of US dollars. Okay, the balance of imports and exports, all right, it's a big deal. It has a huge impact on what the goods and services in our country cost for ourselves, for our consumption, and what the goods and services that we produce cost in other countries, right? So when we talk about the trade deficit, and you've probably heard this term before, it affects the value of our money, the United States dollar, and the cost of the items that we purchase here as consumers, okay? So I'm not going to go through all of these. You can find this in the text, but nonetheless, there's a lot of things that influence our decisions from an economic factor standpoint, right? Things like consumer spending. You know, as an economy, not necessarily us as individuals, but as a populace, are we spenders or are we savers? Well, I'll tell you this, leading up to the financial crisis of '08 and '09, baby, we were spenders. We racked up tremendous debt, mortgages, credit card debt, other debt, okay? And then the financial crisis happened in '08 and '09. And if you look at the amount of consumer debt over the last 10 years, it's shrank dramatically. So we've become savers. We're keeping more of our money for ourselves now. We're using debt more effectively. Money supply, you know, the dollars that are available to spend within our economy. Gross domestic product, this is a big one, okay? Gross domestic product is the total value of all of the goods and services produced within a country's border. Okay, I'm gonna make a note to show you something real quick too, in just a second. Okay, that relates to GDP. And as it relates to Apple, one company, okay, the amount of cash, the market valuation of Apple and how it relates to the gross domestic product of the countries around the world, okay? And it'll blow your mind where Apple as one single company falls in relation to the total economies of certain countries around the world. It's fascinating. Okay, so consumer prices, inflation, a rise in the general level of prices, right? So when we think about how fast are things, prices, goods and services, our investment accounts, okay? So we call it the rule of 72, right? How long is it going to take us to double our money? So the rule of 72 says take 72 and divide it by the annual inflation, all right? Or the interest rate that you're earning on your investment. Okay? And that will tell you the number of years that it will take you for either those prices to double or for your investments to double. So in this example, we've got an inflation rate of 4%. Okay, so we take 72, divide it by 4. All right, prices will double every 18 years. Okay, it's certainly not exact. It's a rule of thumb heuristic. Okay, but it's an important rule to know. All right, so if you want to know that you've got a $500 investment that you made 6% last year on, and you want to know when's that going to turn into $1,000, just take 72 divided by 6. Okay. So just as inflation is the rise in goods and services, there are times when we actually have deflation, which is the opposite, where the prices decline over a period of time. Okay. Consumer spending, it's the total demand as a populace, okay, for the goods and services within a particular economy. Okay. So what opportunities are out there? What is the potential for income? How much money are we spending as an economy? Okay. And then of course, interest rates, which we're familiar with, represents what's the cost of money. How much is it costing me to go out and access the debt markets? How much is it costing me to go out and take on a car loan? Okay. And that's generally speaking dictated by the Federal Reserve monetary policy as well as your credit score. And we'll talk about that in a couple of lectures. But the worse your credit score is, the higher your interest rate is going to be, because the riskier you are to the people lending you money. So, finance is an action sport. We have to take decisions. We have to do something. We have goals that we're trying to accomplish, and we have these resources that we are generating because we're smart people, and we have a job, and we're being paid in US dollars, and we have this wealth that we've created, so let's do something with it, okay? We don't want to go into significant debt. You know, having a mortgage, you know, for 99.9% of the people is unavoidable. So is mortgage debt bad? No, mortgage debt can actually be a good thing for you. As of now, you know, if you itemize your taxes, you can still itemize a portion of your interest. That may change, who knows, okay? Don't make excuses for not starting your plan or creating your path. It's not complicated. It just requires you to spend some time doing it, okay? And then give yourself like a personal mission statement. What are you trying to accomplish? And why are you even doing it? My mission statement is to be more financially secure in the future by holding myself accountable to the plan that I'm putting in place, okay? So set a path and get on the path to putting your finances in a good spot for the future. Okay. The third learning objective, developing your financial goals. Right? This is the fun part. This is literally where no one gets to tell you no. No one gets to tell you, well, that's not attainable. Bunk, all right? It's a whiteboard, and every goal that you've got should be put down, regardless of whether or not it's attainable today, because 10 years down the road, it might be totally attainable. Maybe you want to go get your PhD, you're going to go get your master's, or maybe you want your MBA, maybe you're going to buy that car, maybe you're going to buy the house, maybe you just want to save money for the next couple of years. Whatever it is, you got to write it down. Okay, so developing your personal financial goals is critical. And don't let anybody tell you that your goals are not correct. They're your goals, and they can be totally different than your parents' goals, your friends' goals, your spouse's goals. Now, I'll tell you that you ought to have at least a couple of goals if you are married or you are in a relationship. You ought to have at least a couple of goals that are consistent between the two of you. Otherwise, the relationship is doomed. Right? Types of financial goals. Well, we got timing. We've got goals that we want to accomplish in the short term, all right, which are goals that we can reasonably achieve within the next 12 months. Okay, short-term goals equals within the next 12 months. We have some intermediate term goals, goals that we want to achieve within the next 1 to 5 years. Okay, and then we have long-term goals, stretch goals, okay, for things that we'd like to accomplish beyond that 5-year mark. Okay, so when you think about how specific that goal process is and how specific the plan needs to be, obviously your short-term goals need to be super, super specific, all right, because you're trying to accomplish them within the next year. Your intermediate goals can be maybe a little looser, okay, a little more vague, right? But still needs to have some semblance of discipline around accomplishing, okay? And then the long-term stretch goals are the goals that have the least amount of rigidity to them so that you can adjust on the fly, okay? And not necessarily having a super specific, hyper-focused plan to achieve, okay? Short-term, most focus, long-term, aspirational. Okay? And this is where we get into the SMART goal. Okay? What is a SMART goal? Well, it's 5 things. The first thing is it's got to be a specific goal. Okay? You got to know exactly what your goals are in order to create a plan. Okay? It's got to be a goal that's measurable. You have to be able to hold yourself accountable. Okay, so you have to have a way to measure it. It's action oriented. So you identify what activities you're going to put in place in order to achieve that goal. It needs to be realistic. Okay, something that conforms to where your life is in that moment in time that you're preparing for that goal. Okay, and then finally, it's got to be time-based. Right, meaning you're giving yourself a specific time in which to accomplish that goal. So here's an example of a non-SMART goal. I want to save money for vacation. Okay, that's not a SMART goal. Okay, but I would like to save $100 a month over the next 4 years by putting that money into my savings account in order to save $5,000 within the next 5 years in order to go on vacation. Okay, that is a SMART goal. It's specific, you can measure it, it's action oriented, it's realistic, okay, as long as your budget can hold that deposit or that savings each month, and it's time-based, okay? You're giving yourself the best possible opportunity for success if you follow this SMART process, right? And I can promise you that on the midterm, okay, you will have a question where within the case study, you will need to create a SMART goal for the individual or family being discussed within the case study, okay? And I literally mean you're going to write SMART, and next to S, you're going to tell me what the specific is. Next to M, you're going to tell me how to measure it, and then ART, okay? To get you familiar with how this goal setting process works, okay? If you want to achieve your goals, if you follow this, you just gave yourself a significantly higher probability of success. Okay, the time value of money and how it relates to opportunity cost. Okay, we have a lot of things that we want to try to accomplish in our life. We want to save for retirement. Okay, so the financial acquisition side of this balance, right? We've got car payments, we've got mortgages, we've got college education maybe for either paying for your own graduate degree or your future child's college or education expenses. Insurance costs. We've got things that we just naturally have going on in our life that are financial acquisition related. And on the other side, what are we giving up by acquiring all of those things? Well, what does it take? It takes our time, takes our effort, and health is a big one. You know, there was a long period of time in my life where, you know, I made stupid money, like stupid money, but I was working 100 hours a week and my health deteriorated. I didn't see my son for almost 2 years, for the first 2 years of his life, because I was working so much. You know, I don't make a fraction of the money that I used to make back in those days. But you know what? I go back and give it all up to have the time with my kids, right? So there's a cost associated with the time value of money, okay? And this is important, and I'm going to stress this throughout the course of the semester. Every financial decision that you make, all right, involves you giving something else up in order to achieve the decision that you're taking at that time. You can't avoid it. It's not possible, okay? So, time value of money. What are our resources? How do we use them? How do we grow our wealth? What do we need in order to grow our wealth? And is it reasonable? Okay, so the time value of money basically says that it increases the amount of money as a result of the interest that we earn, or the rate of return that we earn on either savings or our investments over a period of time. Okay, so if we're saving money today, it means we should have more money tomorrow, right? If we spend our money today, it means we're taking away from our wealth, which means spending leads to lost interest, lost money over a longer period of time. Okay, sometimes we can't necessarily avoid having to spend. You guys are going to have a lot of expenses when you graduate college. All right, if you have student loan debt, that's going to be a big one. All right, and we'll look at that. Okay, but sometimes we're in a situation where we have to spend more versus save. Again, opportunity cost. But that just could be, that's where we are in our particular life cycle, and it's unavoidable. So when we talk about how do we go about figuring out what a dollar today is worth 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, right? There's three things that we're really needing to know in order to determine that. So when we talk about the variables, all right, the future value of that $1, future value, okay, is determined based upon three things. Okay, what's the present value of what we have today? The principal, okay, present value. What's the present value of what we have today? What rate of return are we going to get for our investment? Okay, so the interest rate. And then, how long are we talking? Are we putting this money in the investment vehicle for a year, 2 years, 5 years? Okay, so the future value of an investment, of a savings, is based upon the present value today, an expected rate of return, and the length of time that you intend to hold that investment. So what I want to do, and I'll get to, we'll go to Excel in a minute, but we need to have this conversation around compounding interest versus simple interest. Okay, simple interest is exactly what it sounds like. It's really simple. It doesn't compound upon itself. It's the amount that you've got times some annual interest rate times the time period. So if you've got a $100 investment and it earns 10% per year, then you get $10 a year for as long as you keep that investment in there. Okay, it doesn't compound upon itself. So what that means is, for the life of that $100 investment, okay, call it 10 years, you get $10 a year for 10 years. So you receive $100 worth of interest payments, and you have $100 of principal. So the total value, okay, is $200, right? It doesn't grow upon itself every year. So in this example, we've got $500 investment at 6% per year, okay? Looks like we're holding the investment for only a 6-month period of time, okay? So we've got $500 that we're investing. We get 6% a year, but that's for the full year. So we're only getting it for 6 months. So half of 6 is 3%, right? So 3% of $500 is $15. So we get $15. That's it, period, no compounding. So at the end, we've got our initial investment of 500 plus the 15. Okay, so we have $515 at the end. So when we think about how we're going to go about calculating the time value of money, if you're a finance person, you've got a financial calculator, you can use that. I'm going to strictly stick with Excel because, in my personal opinion, it's God's greatest gift to man, and I love it, and I know how to use it. And if you'll stick with me, and if you're not a whiz in Excel, I'll teach you how to use it, okay? Because it is a fantastic software, especially for building a financial plan, all right? So I'm not going to deal with the formula calculation. I'm not going to deal with the time value of money tables. The book has those tables. I just find it easier if you understand the math instead of cheating using a time value of money table. Financial calculator, you can use it if you want to. I'm not going to teach you how to use it, but I am going to teach you how to use Excel to solve the problems that we're going to solve. So when we talk about what's the future value, okay, of a single amount, okay? So we have an investment, we're putting that money in the market, it's going to sit there for a certain period of time and earn a certain amount of interest, okay? So very basically, it's the amount in which your current savings is going to increase based upon that interest rate and based upon a certain time frame, okay? We also call this compounding, and we're going to see the value of compounding in just a second, okay? So what happens with compounding is the next amount that your future interest payment is calculated upon is equal to the original principal plus the interest that you earned in the prior period. So you're earning interest on interest. Okay, so unlike the simple interest where you're only earning interest on that initial deposit, with compounding, you're earning more interest on the interest that you were paid prior. Okay, and we'll walk through an example of this here in a second. So this example, you've got $100 deposited at 6% for 1 year. Just like the simple interest, right? It's going to grow by 6%. So you're going to get $6. So at the end of year 1, you've got $106. Okay, so far right now, if we're talking about simple and compounding, we're in the same boat. Okay, $6 of interest, $106 at the end of that first year, right? If you hold that investment for another year, okay, the interest that you earn in year 2 is calculated based upon $106. So it would be $106 times 6%, so on and so forth down the road. Okay, so when we look at, I think there might be, no, okay. So what I'm going to do here real quick, I'm going to hop into this slide and I'm just going to type this in here for you. Normally I would be writing on the chalkboard or a dry erase board. Okay, so when we look at what does the formula for compounding look like, okay, okay, when we talk about compounding, the formula is the future value is equal to the present value times 1 plus our interest rate, okay, raised to the number of periods. Okay, so if we wanted to know what the value of this $100 was at 6% compounded annually in 10 years, all we have to do is plug in PV is 100, the interest rate is 6%, and the time is 10. And when we do that math, it tells us what the future value of that $100 investment is using the compounded interest method. Okay, and we're going to do an Excel example of this here in just a second. Okay, we can also look at what's the future value of a series of deposits. If we want to save money every month for that vacation after graduation, and we're willing to put $100 a month into a savings account, how much am I going to have in 5 years? Okay, so we call this the future value for a single amount. Okay, which is also termed an annuity. I'll show you how to do that. And you'll see the beauty of Excel here in just a second. So if we go back to this formula, right, that we were talking about for future value calculations, time value of money, there's 4 variables: future value, present value, interest rate, and time. And because God gave us Excel, okay, Excel has functions for every one of those. Okay, so we'll use Excel to tell us what the value of each one of those variables is going to be. It's beautiful. The present value is the current value of a future value based upon a certain interest rate. So if we look to, and we want to know what the present value is, we take the future value calculation where we said the future value is equal to the present value times 1 plus the interest rate to the time period. We rearrange it, okay, And so the present value is equal to the future value divided by, right, 1 plus I to the time period. Okay, we just rearranged the formula a little bit. Okay, so we can use it to figure out if we know what the future value is in the future. Okay, we know we need $5,000 for that vacation in 5 years. Okay, if that 5,000 is a future dollar amount, how much do I need to deposit today with a given interest rate and time frame in order to achieve the $5,000 goal in the future? Okay, all this will kind of come together here when we get into Excel. Okay, so let Excel do the work for you. Okay, Excel has 4 functions. Okay, we've got PV, well, 5 functions technically. So if we want to figure out how much we have to save every month, that's for the annuity. So present value equals PV, future value equals FV, payment, how much we're going to be dealing with on a monthly basis, okay, equals PMT. Now, what kind of rate do we need in order to achieve our goals? Equals rate, all right? And if we're trying to figure out how long it's going to take us to achieve our goals, Excel's got a function for that too called equals NPER, N-P-E-R, number of periods, okay? This second bullet, all right, we're going to talk about compounding and how the number of compounding periods in a given year impacts the calculations. You will have questions on the midterm that relate to compounding and how you change the formulas within Excel to compensate for different compounding outside of just annual, okay? And I promise you this, if you are going to make a mistake on these future value calculations, time value of money calculations, 99.9 times out of 100, you're going to make the mistake because you didn't do the compounding right. Okay? You forgot to adjust for compounding, and I'll show you how to do it. So let's hop over to Excel. Okay. So let's just start with like some really basic time value of money calculations. So number 1, given a 4% interest rate, okay, what is the future value of a lump sum deposit today of $25,000 in 10 years, assuming annual compounding? Okay, this is a classic midterm question. Okay, so we want to know how much money or how much is that 25 grand going to grow to in 10 years given a 4% interest rate, okay, using annual compounding. So what's our present value? Okay, this is where you guys can use the chat room if you want to. Okay, so somebody tell me what's the present value that we're talking about here?
25,000.
25,000, right, exactly. That's the today's dollars. Oops. Okay, what's the rate that we've got? What's our rate of return? What's our interest that we're earning? 4%, right? 4%, great. So we got 4%. Okay, and what's our time frame? What are we looking at? How many compounding periods?
10 years.
10 years, right? So 10 years on an annual compounding basis equates to 10 compounding periods. And that's what we care about, okay? We care about the number of compounding periods in these examples, okay? Not so much the years, because we care about compounding. So 10 years using annual compounding is 10 compounding periods. So time is 10 periods, right? So we've got 3 of the 4 variables. We need to solve for the future value. So using Excel equals FV, okay, bingo, there it is. We open the parentheses, and look at that. We don't have to guess. Excel tells us what it wants, okay? It tells us what it wants. It wants the rate, okay? So you just click on rate. It tells us that it wants the number of compounding periods. So comma, select the number of compounding periods, okay? We hit comma again to go to the next variable. The variable is payment. Are we dealing with any sort of payments? Are we making any sort of monthly contributions, or are we just kind of saying lump sum? There's no payments, right? So we can just skip over it by putting another comma in, or you could put 0 if you want to, okay? And then the present value. What's the present value today? 25 grand, right? Now, this is where you have to pay attention to how Excel works and how Excel views cash flows, okay? Excel looks at this $25,000, right, as cash coming out of your savings and going into an investment vehicle, okay? So it views the present value as a cash outflow because you're taking money out of your wealth to put it into an investment vehicle, okay? So we have to change the sign on the present value to a negative, okay? Because Excel sees present value as cash out, okay? And when we do that, we can close the parentheses now. We've got all the variables. Bingo. Okay? So this tells us that with 10 compounding periods at a 4% interest rate, if we deposit $25,000 today, that $25,000 is going to grow to $37,006.11. Okay? Now, let's compare that to a scenario where we were only dealing with simple interest with no compounding, okay? We still have the $25,000 investment, right? Okay, we still have the 4% per year, correct? Okay, so 4% of 25,000, okay, is $1,000, right? So every year for the 10 years that we have this money invested in a simple interest, no compounding investment, we're getting $1,000, right? Okay, so at the end of that 10-year period, we're going to have accumulated $10,000. So 10 periods at $1,000 a period, right? So the future value on a simple interest, no compounding basis is our principal plus the interest that we earned. And the difference is the power of compounding. You earned an extra $2,000 on your investment simply because of compounding, simply because the interest that you earned in year 2 was based upon the principal and interest of year 1. And then in year 3, the interest that you earned was on the principal and interest of year 1 plus the principal interest in year 2. So you're using compounding to grow your wealth, okay? This is important to understand, okay? So moving down to number 2. Same kind of scenario, same exact numbers, okay? Except we're going to use monthly compounding. So how many periods, how many compounding periods are there over 10 years if we're using monthly compounding?
120.
120. 12 months a year times 10 years. So 120. So we still have the 25,000, right? Okay. And I'm going to show you the annual, then I'm going to show you how we flip it. We still have the 4% and we still have 10 years, right? But on a monthly compounded basis, we still have the 25 grand, except now our rate is the per period rate. Okay, so we have to take that 4% and convert it into a monthly rate or whatever the compounding period rate is. So if we're compounding monthly, we know that it's 12 times a year. So we take the annual rate and we divide it by 12. Okay, so Excel did that work for us. Okay, and then when we're talking about the time, remember, number of compounding periods. So we take the number of years multiplied by the number of compounding periods within the year, which gets us to 120, okay? And then we run the same calculations, equals FV with the rate, the number of periods, and the present value as a negative, okay? And we come up with 37,270.82, okay? So if we look at the power of monthly compounding versus annual compounding, we're $265 better off under a monthly compounding scenario. Okay, so this will be posted on Moodle. All right, so you don't have to go worry about recreating all of this. All right, but you need to understand how to use the equals FV, equals PV, PMT, rate, and number of periods to get to the answers that you need. And God willing, Connect will be functional, and I'll be able to give you some additional work on calculating these things. So, question 3, all right? If you're looking to buy a new car in 3 years, all right, and you've budgeted that you're going to need $3,500 to put a down payment down on this car, right? How much do you need to deposit today in order to achieve the goal? Okay, you're going to put it into a relatively safe investment that earns 3% per year. Okay, how much you need to put down today in order to achieve that? Annual compounding. Well, what's the future value? How much are you trying to save?
3,500.
3,500 bucks. That's the future value. You are going to be putting a down payment 3 years down the road equal to 3,500 bucks. Okay. The rate, our rate is 3%. Okay? And it's 3 years. Do we need to adjust for any other kinds of compounding? No, because it's annual, right? It's annual, it's 3 years, therefore it's 3 compounding periods, correct? So, what do you have to put in the bank today to achieve your goal? You need to deposit $3,203 today, okay? And we did that by looking at the equals PV, okay? So we're trying to figure out what is it in today's dollars that we need to do. So that's a present value calculation. So equals PV, okay? And Excel tells us the rate. We enter the number of periods, okay? There's no payment because we're not making monthly savings deposits. It's a lump sum, so there's no payment. And the future value of 3,500. Now we don't need to change that to a negative because Excel sees future value as money coming back to us. Okay, so Excel views present value as money going out and future value as money coming in. So in a present value calculation, you keep the future value what it is. And there you go. Okay, so if you're saving up for your car and you want a lump sum, putting some money into an investment that's going to grow at 3% a year for the next 3 years, you need to deposit $3,203 today to make that happen. Okay. So question 4, again, same numbers, but now we're doing quarterly compounding. Do you think that you're going to have to put more money into the investment or less money into the investment if your investment is compounded more frequently?
I'd say less money.
Less money, all right? You are turning your money over. You're making more interest on interest, an increasingly number of periods of time, okay? So again, future value, 3,500, okay? The rate is 3%, okay? The time frame is still 3 years, but now we have to convert it into the appropriate compounding for quarterly, okay? So the PV, the future value is still 3,500, but now we have to convert the rate into the appropriate number of compounding periods, okay? So if we're making 3% a year and it compounds quarterly 4 times a year, then the 3% gets divided by 4, and that's our quarterly compounding rate, okay? And then we have to do something similar with the length of time. right? Because it's a quarterly compounding, the number of compounding periods is no longer 3, it's 3 times 4. So we have 12 compounding periods for this scenario. And when we do that, all right, when we run the same PV calculation, we can see that Nolan was correct and Marie was right. It's slightly less than what we would have had on an annual basis. Okay, so we don't need to pick as much money out of our pocket if we're achieving higher levels of compounding. Okay, that's what this example is designed to show you. In addition to going through whether it's on a monthly compounded basis, quarterly compounded basis, annual compounding basis, you just need to remember to adjust for the number of compounding periods. If it's annual, your rate is your rate. Your number of periods is the number of years. If it's monthly, your rate needs to be the per period rate. So you need to divide by 12. The number of periods needs to be the total number of compounding periods. So 12 times a year, your money's being compounded. Quarterly is 4. Okay. Now let's talk about making down payments. Okay. So you've learned something in your most important class at Loyola. You will, I promise. You've decided to start contributing to your employer's retirement plan. Excellent. You're going to contribute $500 a month, every month, for the next 25 years. You can expect a reasonable rate of return of 7% over this time frame. What is the future value of these deposits? Okay. It's not tricky. You just got to put the variables in. So what's our present value? What's our present value of our retirement account?
0.
Bagel. We got nothing. Okay. Now, how much are we going to be contributing every month? What's our payment into the plan? 500, right? Our rate is 7%, and our time frame is 25 years. Okay. But remember, words matter. Words matter. We need to adjust for compounding because we're contributing monthly. Okay. So we have to adjust our rate by 12. We have to adjust our periods by 12 as well. So we now have 300 compounding periods, so 25 times 12. Okay. And now we'll see putting $500 a month away into your 401k plan, okay, at 7% a year, which is really not that unreasonable, okay, gets you to an account value at retirement 25 years down the road of over $405,000. Okay, so when you start trying to plan for putting money into your retirement plan from your employer, remember this. It will help you understand, if I want to retire as a millionaire, okay, how much money do I need to be putting away into my 401k now every month if I want to retire as a millionaire? Super important. That's reality, people, right? Real world stuff. Okay. Number 6, you've built your budget. You've determined you can reasonably afford a $275 per month car payment. Okay. What all-in price can you afford to pay to achieve this budget goal? Your finance company is offering you a 5-year loan at a 4.5% annual rate compounded monthly. Okay. What's the future value of the loan? Anybody want to take a guess? What's the future value of any loan after the loan's paid off? 0. Thank you, Jade. Appreciate that. So the future value of that loan is 0, right? Because at the end, you own the car and you don't owe the bank anything. Okay, so the future value of the loan is nothing. Your payment is $275. Your rate is 0.045% or 4.5%. Okay, keep it consistent there, David. And it's a 5-year loan. All right, but guess what? It's compounded monthly. Okay, so what is this telling us? Well, we got the loan ends. We're going to pay $275 a month at a 4.5 interest rate compounded monthly. So we got to adjust the 4.5 by 12. So it's 0.00375 per compounding period. And we got a 5-year loan, but it's 60 months, right? You're used to seeing some of those numbers, right? And when we do the math and we shove it into the PV calculation, it tells us that we can afford to go out and buy a $14,751 car. If our budget dictates that we can spend $275 a month, okay, then we can afford a $14,751 vehicle. Okay. All right. Last two here. You're going to take a trip to the Maldives after graduation. You estimate you're going to need $5,000 for this trip. It's way underestimated, but we're just going to say 5,000. You're going to do it in 4 years. How much do you have to save each month to achieve this goal? Your investment will return 6% a year. How much do you need to save each month? Okay, so words matter. So what kind of compounding are we using? Annual, quarterly, monthly?
Monthly.
Monthly, okay? How much do you need to save each month? There's the key word, all right? So our future value, we need $5,000 in the future. Our present value is 0. We don't have anything saved right now. We're trying to figure out how much we need to put away every month. We're going to get an interest rate equivalent to 6% divided by 12 to give us that per month rate. And we have 4 years to accomplish this goal. So 4 years times 12 compounding periods per year is 48 total compounding periods. So if we do that, Excel has this, again, this magical formula equals PMT, payment, right, equals PMT, open it up, and it tells you what you need to put in. So we click on the rate, comma, the number of periods, comma, the present value, 0, and what the future value is. Bingo, bango, bongo. You have to save $92.43 a month if you want to have 5,000 bucks for your trip to the Maldives in 4 years. Okay, I hope you're starting to see now how a simple formula can have significant impact on your personal life. Real world stuff, things that, you know, I do every day to figure out how much I've got to save for my kids' college, or things that your parents are probably doing, trying to figure out how they're paying for your college, okay, or your grandparents. So that's a payment calculation. Now we got the final one, the final variable that we can have problems around. How many periods is it going to take me to accomplish my goal? How long is it going to take me to do what I want to do here? Credit card debt. Let's look at that one. You got $5,000 in credit card debt. You've worked on your budget to determine that you can afford to pay $125 a month. Credit card company charges you 17% interest per year compounded monthly. How long is it going to take you to pay off your credit card? Well, just like in the car loan, if you're paying off your credit card, the future value is 0. Okay. The present value is 5,000, right? That's the current balance. The rate is 17% divided by 12 because we're compounded monthly. The payment is 125 bucks a month. And Excel has this magical formula called equals NPER, number of periods, okay, where it's going to solve for this variable. We have our rate, we have our payment, we have our present value, we have our future value, and it will take you 59.5 months to pay that credit card off if you pay it off at $125 a month. Okay? Making sense? All right. Does anybody have any questions around how we use Excel for this. And I'll put this out on Moodle so you'll have time to kind of go and review the scenarios that we just stepped through and how we use Excel for compounding annual, monthly, quarterly. Okay. As you will on the midterm, definitely have questions that revolve around, you will have at least one question where you will be asked a future value question, you'll be asked a present value question, you'll be asked a rate question, and you'll be asked a number of periods question to test your ability to use each 4 of those formulas. Okay. All right. We're almost wrapped up for tonight. That's the one thing. I'm going to ask you guys a question. Have you found, like, on your Zoom calls with your other professors, that like a lot of them may not necessarily be getting to like their full-time allotment, because like there's like the level of interaction via, you know, a Zoom call is so drastically different than the level of interaction that would occur in the classroom. You know, how have your professors been doing in terms of, you know, have they just been cramming stuff in to fill the time, or have they been kind of, you know, teaching the same things and it ending earlier than otherwise normal?
Most of my teachers have just been ending earlier.
Yeah.
For the most part. I mean, sometimes we'll just like go into like a random conversation that's not necessarily off topic, but not necessarily needed.
Right.
We'll just like talk about it for like a while. That's about it.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely start to see, you know, some of the benefits of, you know, in-class learning, because I think it definitely, it helps supplement, you know, the overall topics of the evening. But, you know, I certainly am not going to, you know, waste you guys' time with off-topic stuff, as opposed just to keep you here till, you know, 9:15. I know. And when I start to see all the videos go off, I'll know everybody's fallen asleep. Okay, so here we go. Wrap it up. The final learning objective: going about achieving our financial goals. One of the reasons why I love this text and why I've used it. This is a different edition than what I've used you know, over the last couple of years. They've made some good updates to it. But is that the chapters in the text follow the plan? Okay, it follows the plan. So the chapters in the text are essentially guiding you through all the various aspects of your financial plan. Okay, so part 1 of the whole process deals with what we're talking about tonight. We're going to kind of skip over chapter 2 because you can read that on your own. I would encourage you to read it, but it's not something that I would like to spend, you know, 2 hours talking about. But chapters 3 and 4 is when we get into the meat of it. You know, analyzing your own financial statements, developing your budget. How much disposable income do you have left over? So planning your resources, right? What do you have to use? Part 2, chapters 5, 6, and 7, we're going to get into saving and spending and borrowing. Well, spending's in the next one, but borrowing in chapters 6 and 7. How do we use the debt markets to go about building credit? How do we borrow money, use it as leverage to achieve our goals more effectively? Part 3, how we go about making purchasing decisions. So that'll get us into the whole conversation about, you know, what's the best time of the year to buy a car? We talked about the TV last week, but just other things. How do we go about making the good decisions for our purchasing habits? How do we manage risk? Chapters 10 through 12. We're going to talk about insurance, both from I hate life insurance. I hate it. But there are some insurance policies that are really valuable that we are going to talk about. For the most part, the insurance policies just do nothing but put money into the insurance salesman's pocket. Okay, but there are some that are really valuable. Okay, and we'll talk about what risk is to begin with. Okay, and how we go about hedging that risk out of our life. And then finally, in parts 5 and 6, how do we put our resources to use within the markets? We'll look at securities selection, mutual fund analysis, ETF analysis. We'll talk briefly about technical analysis. How do we know when it could be the right time to buy or sell using something called the MACD, or moving average convergence divergence? You won't have to calculate that, trust me, but it's a chart that you can plop up onto, you know, a trend of price that's readily available on Yahoo Finance or Morningstar, but it kind of will help you make some decisions around when it might be a good time or when it might be a good time to sell or buy. And then finally, we wrap up the semester towards the tail end of the book with retirement and estate planning. All right, and that's when we get to have the conversation about your advanced healthcare directives and your will, and then the whole process concludes. Okay, so the text is great because it steps us through all the different parts of building a solid, achievable financial plan. Okay, so it's a formalized report. It's not necessarily written on the back of a napkin. I mean, it could be if you're out having a cocktail and you're bored and you just want to do your financial plan, but then you got to convert it into something material, something specific, something that you can refer back to. Okay, it can be created by you, by yourself, in conjunction with your parents, in conjunction with your girlfriend, boyfriend, spouse, partner, whatever. Okay, you can even go into your banking software, whether it's Wells Fargo, Bank of America, PNC. They've all kind of stepped up their game a little bit on this to help manage your expenses. And next week, we're going to talk about things like Venmo, PayPal, the budgeting parts of your banking institutions, which are good, which need work, okay? And Venmo is going to be a big one because I know a lot of y'all use Venmo, but it's really crappy at actually tracking where all of your money's going. It's good at telling you that you gave $50 to your buddy for concert tickets, but in terms of being able to download that information and being able to track a specific expense called entertainment, all right, it doesn't do a very good job of that. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit more about that next week. Okay, and look, here's the bottom line. By developing a plan, you set yourself apart from the other people who are not developing a plan. Okay, and it allows you to develop good financial habits. Spending, saving, and sharing in the most efficient way at whatever various life cycle that you're in throughout the course of your life. From now, when you're still in college at Loyola, to when you're the CEO of a company maybe one day, to your future time in retirement, right? Having a plan is extremely important. Okay, so there's a lot of resources out there, okay? Money Magazine, I like to read the Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal. They become a little bit overly political in my opinion for like if you want real like down the middle investment advice, but they're still good. They have good articles and their weekend journal's pretty solid. Financial Times, Morningstar is a good one, but there's a lot of resources out there to kind of help you along this process. Okay, and that's it, guys, gals. Any questions about what we talked about tonight? Any questions about the time value of money? That's really the meat of tonight. Okay, when we start thinking about like getting closer to the midterm, the two things that you need to really understand from what we talked about, three things from what we talked about tonight are the cycle of the financial planning process. You need to understand what the 6 parts are. Okay, you need to understand where'd it go. SMART goals, because you'll have questions about that. And then, of course, you need to understand how to use Excel to determine present value, future value, payments, rates, and the number of periods. Okay, those are the 3 things, the key takeaways from lecture tonight that you are definitely 100% going to find on the midterm. Okay, so thinking ahead, all right. I'm going to put some Connect homework out there. I'm going to make it due by class time next Tuesday, just like normal. But if I start hearing that we've had problems with people not being able to get registered and the Connect website is all jacked up, then I'll look at extending the deadline. Okay, so for right now, just assume that the Connect homework is going to be due next Tuesday prior to class. Please keep reading the Personal Finance for Dummies book because that paper is not due next week, but it's due the following week. Okay, and please read chapter 2 before we come to lecture next week. All right. And yes, remember we have a visitor next week, so only positive comments. Bonus points to people who tell me I'm awesome in the chat room. Okay. Okay. If there's no questions, I'm not going to keep you anymore. Have a great rest of your night. Have a great rest of the week, and reach out if you want some more work on Excel or just want to chat about the Second Amendment. All right? Take it easy.
Thank you.
You.
Thank you.
Thank you.